and gentlemen, this is episode 9 of Wachama Talks. Our guest today is Kris Devéria.
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 Yes.
Wow. Sounds even better than I sound.
Thank you.
And he is currently the project coordinator of Renew project, which is a nature restoration project initiated by Otherwise. He is also the founder and lead composer or lead guitarist of Shunyata.
Yes.
Shunyata, which is a kind of a rock band which also deals with topics like sustainability and philosophy.
A little bit, yeah.
I wrote up for myself that this is kind of the nirvana of sustainability.
And that's interesting.
You are involved in many green activities around Wageningen. A couple of years ago you were also involved with the fossil-free movement. You are still supporting them somehow, sometimes?
I'm passively supporting them. I was at their event on, what was that, Monday or Tuesday? They had a thing on Infora about the Milieudefensie rechtszaak against Shell. They sued Shell, I attended that, and I also signed because I think it is important.
So for those who haven't looked it up, what was this case? Actually, the Milieudefensie, this is a kind of environmentalist group in the Netherlands, and they sued Shell, and they claim that Shell is responsible for 1/5 of the global CO2 and all kind of fossil fuel related output. It was quite interesting to listen to that talk. Yeah, we are getting there, and basically these are the two topics what you are pretty much involved in, the Otherwise and Shunyata.
Yes, at the moment.
The main topics.
Yeah. Let's stick with that for now.
Yeah, sure.
There are more things that I'm involved in. But we'll get to that.
Actually, you are not from Holland. Or your parents are from.
My father was born in Glasgow, Scotland.
Okay.
And I was born in Aberdeen, Scotland.
Aberdeen, yeah. It's North Scotland.
It's on the east coast.
Yeah.
But it's not quite in the north, but it's
like 150 kilometers up north from Edinburgh, somewhere like.
Honestly, I don't even know. Because the thing is, I was born there, but I'm really not very representative of Scottish people. My mother is Dutch and was born in Limburg. I also grew up in Gabon in Africa, actually. Wow. I spent 6 years there as a kid. This has to do with the fact that my dad worked for Shell.
Wow.
As an engineer.
Yeah.
So we were in Africa for the oil, and I grew up in a Shell camp.
Wow.
In the jungle, and it was really great. I mean, Shell takes very good care of their employees. We traveled quite a bit. We also went on vacation to South Africa, Kruger National Park. We went to Canada, went to Florida a few times, and later my dad worked in Egypt, so we visited there. I remember diving at Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh, all these places. As far as youth goes, it was quite good, at least in a material sense. So I lived in Gabon from 1989 to 1996, then came back to the Netherlands. And then we moved to Assen, in the north of Holland, and I lived there for about 12 years.
Okay.
As I graduated from high school and started, the Dutch equivalent of college in Groningen. Yeah. I started with Sociale Juridische Dienstverlening, which translates as social judicial service. Because I did feel, I don't know where this comes from, but I felt like I want to help other people. So I found this, and I thought, okay, I'll just do this, but it was not a very conscious decision. And within a few months, I realized, like, oh, I was very shy in these days, very insecure. So in 2003, I started these studies in the social judicial service thing. But the next year, I felt I had an obligation to study to my parents. And then I started studying Bouwkunde in Groningen, or construction, constructive engineering. It's kind of like with an element of architecture, but it's not really architecture. But because I was attracted to designing things, and I like to draw. Cool. I like to be creative. I was also around that time that I got more and more interested in Buddhism. And this is one of the things what I like about Wachama is Mr. Alan Watts over there. I got to hear about him, and somebody sent me a YouTube video in, I think, 2007, 2008. It's the one, A Conversation with Myself, and that just really started a lot for me, because at that point I was just hooked. I started listening more and more to Alan Watts, and it just became like, wow, I was very confused by what he was saying, but more and more I thought, like, this is such a different outlook on life than anything I've ever heard, like either from religion or from hard scientific people or from anybody in my environment who doesn't have any answers. So that helped me it kind of forced me out of my comfort zone, and forced me to look carefully at myself and change things and do things that I really wanted to do. Because if you don't do what you want to do, and you do things that you think you're supposed to do, you're never going to do them well.
It's pretty much happens with 95% of the population.
Exactly. And that's why things were terrible for me for a long time. So I quit studying this construction stuff in 2008, I think, and then I started to think, like, oh, actually I feel really passionate about writing music. So I decided, okay, I live in Utrecht now, I want to go to the HKU, Hogeschool van de Kunsten Utrecht. I didn't get accepted to the school even after 3 years of trying, but I met some wonderful people. I learned a lot from the teachers that were there. And in 2010 I started this job at Oxio in Hilversum, and I had a manager who was a little bit weird, but a great guy, and also very important to me, a really important teacher, somebody who was able to trigger me to not stay stuck in my comfort zone, but to get out of that and challenge myself and grow as a person. And so he had more and more influence, and he also encouraged me to take this course that this company was offering, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. And I was very skeptical at first. I thought it would be a program to make me a better worker bee, and it was really cool that they actually were really, you have to figure out for yourself what you want to do with your life. Nobody can figure that out for you. It was really, self-empowering, and it was like, oh, wow, I thought this was going to be about the company, and I thought, like, okay, well, I know I don't want to work here anymore. And I'm not going to. So I was very clear about that, and throughout that year I just became more and more confident about, like, I can find something and follow my own values and not do what society or people around me or my parents or anything are telling me to do, and it will turn out okay.
And what did make you choose the Van Gaal Ladenstein to do the rural development and innovation?
Well, this is what led to that decision. So this was around the summer of 2011. it was also that summer that I went to Zentrum in Utrecht and actually finally started to do real Zen meditation. And suddenly all this stuff that I'd been listening to from Alan Watts started making a whole lot more sense. But why did I mention that?
Because I asked you why did you choose the rural?
Oh
development,
so I was aware of many of the issues in the world, and sustainability was something that I'd also heard about throughout my youth. And I was just, I wanted to be a positive force in the world. So I did look into what are my own values, also through the 7 habits of highly effective people. There's this whole the second habit is, I think it's the second habit, it's about beginning with the end in mind. So basically, like when you're dead and you suppose you could go to your own funeral, what would you like people to say about you? Well, I would like people to say that I tried.
So you attended to Van Hal Larestein from 2012?
Yes. I found Van Hal Larestein as an option for me. I didn't know anything about Wageningen, other than it was sort of a green place, and that's where hippies come from in the Netherlands. So that was sort of my vague image of Wageningen. So I went to an open day, and Van Hal Larestein was still here in Wageningen at that time. And then I decided, okay, I'll sign up. And I started in September 2012. And it was suddenly a totally different world again, because I'd been working for about 4 or 5 years before that, I think. And then I had to deal with people who were 10 years younger than I was, because at the time I was 28. And some of the students were 18. But I also learned that really doesn't matter very much, and that's another thing that's in a lot of people's heads, like, oh, but you're so and so old. It's a barrier if you think like, oh, I'm 28. Oh, I can't study anymore because I'm too old. I'm supposed to be 21 when you start studying or whatever. If I thought that, I really wouldn't be where I am today, and today I'm quite happy with where I am. So that's a stupid idea, a stupid thought. It shouldn't
to be influenced what other people think about you.
Or what you think that you're supposed to think about yourself.
So what I wrote up here, because I didn't know that you had this quite international background from Gabon, and so I wrote up this question that you spent internships in 3 different worlds. Like I consider Hungary as a second world country. And you also went to California and also India. And it was, I don't know how was the time frame of these 3 places, but Gabon was already back in time.
That was.
So and you were a kid. You had a totally different view on these differences, what you could see in the first world, the second world, and the third world. And can you elaborate on that?
Well, so if we're talking about Hungary, California, and southern India, I'm not really sure where to start, because also my experiences in all these places were quite different. My reasons for being there were a bit different as well. Hungary was only 10 days. And we went to Pécs, and some small villages in Baranya County. It was a group excursion with the whole class and some teachers, and we went door to door. We did interviews with people there. And our question that we were trying to answer there was, how do people perceive that things have changed? Or do they perceive things that have they improved or gotten worse since the fall of communism.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting because most people, I think, wanted to go back to that time because they had stability then, and things were, you know, more level. And yeah, you know, capitalism, then some people prospered, but most people kind of they didn't know how to deal with the situation, and as a result, there's scheefgroei, as they say in Dutch. So they grew apart, and the community was fell apart a bit, and the new generation, they want to go to where the wealth is, and they want to go to the urban centers.
Yeah.
So the future is not so good for these small rural areas. And that, I think, is something that's everywhere in the world. In California, I went to Quail Springs permaculture site because the first year of my studies, I heard about permaculture. It was a very vague thing for a long time. I also watched this documentary, Green Gold, and then I went to Quail Springs, which is permaculture in the desert, Mojave Desert, 5 hours from LA. And I'm mentioning that because I'll come back to that later to talk about Renew. It's important. It's hard to say because I didn't really go to mainstream agricultural areas in California, but I've seen documentaries, and you know, we all know quite a bit, I think, about the United States because there's a lot of media attention, and so I do know that there are also rural areas in the United States which are falling apart because of migration and because of lack of support in all kinds of ways. So that's, I think, is the same everywhere. It was actually only a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something, that there's more people living in urban areas now than in rural areas.
Since 2014.
Right, yeah, so just 4 years ago, for the first time ever in the history of humanity.
We never know.
Well, probably.
I mean, we don't even know the history of humanity.
That's true.
The mainstream.
Yeah, but I mean, basically,
what we know.
Yeah, they say civilization started with agriculture, so you start measuring from there. And in India, I did spend quite some time in some villages, but it was very difficult to connect to people and talk to people. So, but I observed a lot, and they have I mean, to me, the culture is so difficult, complicated, and rigid, very stuck in certain ways, very conservative.
You mean the caste system, for example?
Yeah, although nobody talked about it when I was there, so I think it's just sort of taken for granted or accepted as like, well, this is the way it is. And it wasn't until later that I actually started reading more and more about it, and then I saw certain patterns in what I observed in certain people, and I realized like, oh, that's also why what they're doing at my internship is that's why that's their approach. So at some point I realized as I was working and I was digging these swales with this amamuti as a kind of a digging tool that they use there, and a swale is a kind of a water retaining trench that they use everywhere in permaculture. And I realized I would probably not mind this so much if I was doing this under different social circumstances. If I was doing this on my own site with friends, people that I feel comfortable with, I would be so much happier to be doing this work. And that's, to me, very important. I just am a very social or very sensitive person, very intuitive. Under the right conditions, I can do amazing things. Under other conditions, I'm a mess.
Okay, Kris, let's talk about the current project, which is Renew.
Yep.
Is it an abbreviation of? Because I read some text
yeah.
and I found it. Wow, I thought the Renew is already a good name, but then it made sense that it's What was it exactly?
Well, the funny thing is I didn't realize it was an abbreviation until just about a week ago, because I was just looking at something where we would have ecosystem restoration and Wageningen, ERW, and then I just had a whole list of different acronyms, and I thought, okay, Renew, that sounds appropriate. But it was only recently that I realized, like, oh, it's Restoration Network Wageningen.
Yeah, cool, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
So you had yesterday the kickoff event, basically,
Yes.
or we know what I know that it's an initiative from Otherwise, because every year there are certain topics what Otherwise initiates.
Oh, many.
And people can start also join Otherwise and start to work on these topics.
Mm-hmm.
And you are kind of the leading figure of Renew. You are the most active in this project.
We're not hierarchical, so it's me, Matthijs Kool, and Jure Zwart, and Jure is also a coordinator for Otherwise.
Okay, cool.
And I'm secretary for Otherwise also.
Yeah. So it's about ecosystem restoration.
Exactly. Yeah.
All around because the message is that everybody is kind of bitching around that, hey, we have to save the trees, we have to save the bees, we have to do this and that, but no one is really taking action. We learn a lot about this stuff, but there is no real practical education on these. There are some courses, but still I think also those who are not 100% following these kind of studies, they would be also like to be involved in ecosystem restoration.
I can say a little bit about how things got started. It really is the result of my focus within my studies on ecosystem restoration, which is the result of seeing the Green Gold documentary by John D. Liu in 2013, and then deciding I want to know more about this, and I want to know how to do this. This sounds really great, very rewarding, I think, very interesting field. Many different disciplines come together here.
So what is the documentary about?
The documentary is primarily about how John, as a filmmaker during the 90s, somehow ended up in China. Well, he's Chinese American, so I think that might be why. But he ended up filming the government-sponsored, government-initiated project for the Loess Plateau in the north of China, which is a huge area, which traditionally had been a very, like in the ancient texts, it's apparently a very productive and lush site, very fertile area, about the size of, sometimes they say the Netherlands, sometimes they say Belgium. I think it's, the overall size is bigger than that, but they restored an area about the size of Belgium since the 1990s, by planting trees and by building terraces and doing all kinds of things and involving the local population, involving the farmers. And he documented that, and it changed him as well. It really, he decided, to study ecology after that. And so he's also, since then, he's started documenting more sites that are similar. And he's really, I think, become a very visible figure and kind of like a bit of a spokesperson in a way for this ecosystem restoration movement.
This plateau was totally arid.
Yes.
In the end,
because of
linear
centuries
thinking
of
industrial or whatever.
Not just industrial, but just poor land management. Just like overgrazing and cutting down trees, focusing on cash crops, these kinds of things. and that causes land degradation. It's just land mismanagement, and it happens all over the world. Happened in like, for example, in the Dust Bowl in the early 20th century in the United States. Farmers were cutting down trees in order to be able to plant more monoculture crops, and then there was nothing to stop the wind, and all the topsoil blew away.
So in the countryside, the main reasons of soil degradation or ecosystem degradation, we can say, is the monocultural plantations and overgrazing. These are the main two.
Well, I don't know if it's the main ones, but they're definitely huge factors.
Yeah, but most of the time when they do, maybe also the oil companies, they do some bad stuff, but in general, for example, in places where there is no oil but there is fertile
there are farms,
land, then the mainstream is that let's focus on cash crops. And
in many places
there is a very linear thinking of this business model. And that's what I see.
Short term.
That's what I see also in Hungary. I also I read a book from Bill Mollison about permaculture, and in the first couple of pages it was already stated how much is the soil loss, and then when it was so huge amount that I was flattered, like, Jesus. But then I looked up the Hungarian Soil Institute and the Dutch Soil Soil Research Institute, and they had exactly the same numbers, like Bill Mollison said. And these farmers, they are actually most of the time active for 30-40 years, and they don't see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
So that's why we have to.
Because our societies are also focused on short-term establishment, I guess. That was also why Quill Springs was such an interesting place, because they were preparing for the next 7 generations.
That was your internship.
That was my internship in California, and they were in the desert trying to also show that you can change things. They weren't so focused on actually restoring the land actively, but they're a model, and they have a lot of courses and so on, and that's their main focus.
So what did you say? They were focusing on the next 7 generations?
Yeah, they have a 200-year plan.
That's a nice initiative.
I didn't really, I didn't get to read it, but I heard them, we talked a little bit about it, and it's more about like creating values, a value system, I think, that that is adaptable to following generations and changes, and because you have to have some kind of flexibility, I think, for whatever may come, because you cannot predict everything.
But for example, Jeff Lawton was also busy with in Jordan with.
He was also at Quill Springs. I didn't meet him, but
he was also there. So these are the two main figures. This John D. Louis and Jeff Lawton, who are also made some documentaries and quite involved. And yesterday with the opening, you had a Dutch guy too from Africa Wood Grows, or what
Africa Wood Grow. His name is Roland Lelyveld. And I feel more and more that there's a little bit like ecosystem restoration isn't necessarily a brand new thing, and there are many different ways to do it. And certainly Jeff Lawton and also Warren Brush, the owner of Quill Springs, or the founder of Quill Springs, and some other people. Those people are more coming from a permaculture point of view, and I think John is also more and more coming from that side, which is very different than the top-down approach of, for example, the Chinese government. But there are also many other projects, and Mette Skol, one of the other people with Renew, has worked with Meta, for example, and has done other. I'm not too sure what he's done, but he's spent a lot of time in Africa, in different countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and stuff. Working on projects.
But
there.
I was mentioning this. What was the Dutch guy's name?
Roland Lelyveld. So he was also in Kenya.
Because he was there also yesterday at the opening.
Yes.
So what did he share?
So he told the story about how in 2005 he did an internship in Kenya, and then basically made this plan to, with his own money and in his own time, buy land in Kenya together with a partner there, and just plant trees and show local population also that they can plant trees and actually restore deserted areas.
The other thing was kind of interesting what he mentioned in a documentary. I guess he was also mentioning it in the speech he gave, that he wants to turn the ecosystem or even the economy to forestry based economy, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't do this whole thing as a philanthropist movement, because he has to also
there's
earn
definitely
the money.
An economic incentive. Yeah.
And that also attracts other people too, I guess.
Yeah.
So with Renew, you already focus on places around Wageningen,
Yes.
like at Pau,
Yeah.
and you have also some contacts in Southern Europe, because also it's very interesting to see that how people influenced our nature and our surroundings, and we don't have the reference point when we grow up that, if it's an arid area, then we think that it was always arid, but who knows? And
exactly.
Maybe because it was just hundreds of years of overgrazing, what you said, in China.
Yeah. Well, even when my dad was in Egypt, he came back with bits of fossilized wood, because there used to be trees in the Sahara Desert. Long
Sure.
time ago,
Are you familiar with Graham Hancock's work?
I know the name, but no, I'm not.
Yeah, he is an English writer, but also he was an investigative journalist, and he is putting together the pieces of ancient history all over the world, also including Egypt. And he was contacting all of these different scientists, and on the Sphinx you can find erosions.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so that means that there should have been rain for thousands of years around, and there was around 9,000 years ago when the weather was like that. But our written history starts from 5,000 BC, which is less than 9,000 years back. Right. So there is some gaps in our knowledge.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly a very interesting topic.
And what is the next step? How was the meetup? Were there many people interested already in this?
Well, yeah, it was honestly, it was a very good launch, and we told our stories, and we explained what Renew is, and I'll explain it again here. Renew is an Otherwise Foundation project where we want to create a community around this theme of ecosystem restoration, because a lot of people here are talking about it, but there's not really a platform to get people together. And what we want to do is also give people hands-on experience, because we found that through, for example, we found that a lot of people are needed, but they don't have very much experience, including international land and water management students. For example, they go to Spain or Portugal once a year in the master program, I believe, and that's the only practical experience they have, and it's more like consultancy for local people there, rather than that they actually learn how to build a dam or how to build a zuni bowl or a swale or something like that. And so they don't have the hands-on experience, yet they still are then later in the work field expected to do all kinds of research and projects and so on. And I just felt that from my own experiences in India, it might have been tough, but I really learned when I did my minor at the university. I was able to visualize things and understand on a deeper level why is it important to manage your water and everything, because it's just so much more concrete when you're standing there in the desert in the heat and you need water. It's very crucial,
Yeah.
It's a totally different story than if you're reading a book in a cool classroom in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Or
So
talking to
many scientists are disattached from,
for
from
sure.
actually what they are researching.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of students here also that they notice that and they want the practical experiences, and that's what we want to do. So next week we have our first workshop at Bouw, at the Eco Village, where we will be looking at the erosion that they have there from the ruins that were dug up.
Yeah.
And we'll have people working in groups and considering different ways and how did they tackle it, and then we'll have a follow-up later and look at like, okay, well, this group did this group did that, what was successful, what was not successful, why, and then we actually learn by doing rather than learning by reading or hearing about.
And this community would have also a multi-purpose engagement, because people can get, who are interested, they can get actual knowledge, but also at places where they are needed, where these kind of scientists or experts are needed. If a government wants to do something on a bigger level or a local community and they need the knowledge, then they can contact this
eventually that
community.
would be, exactly, that would be a great, we could be a source of for outside organizations and governments and whatnot, to find these people. So it's also a portal in that sense, and it's a networking, it's a restoration network. So it's a place where people can also connect with each other and find things through each other, and also as it would serve as a platform for students to present what they've already know, and so you can learn from each other. And be listened to by people who are interested in what you want to talk about in this field. And so you mentioned we are talking to places in Portugal and Spain. We are also talking to people with the ecosystem restoration camps. Actually, next month, in probably 3 weeks from now, there will be we're organizing an event with the people of the ecosystem restoration camps, which was an initiative by John D. Liu.
Maybe we can say the date, because
there is not a concrete date yet.
Okay.
So it's somewhere between the 10th and the 13th of May.
Okay.
And John will probably also be there. So it's very important. And we will be trying to find the right people to actually go to these places, also in Portugal, and hopefully we'll grow that also to other places in Greece and on the other side of the Mediterranean and Italy and wherever. Yeah, we might also have an excursion to one of these sites at the end of August.
Yeah.
So
can we get into a bit what kind of fields or topics can people learn about, or are very very related to this nature restoration? Because we were talking about grazing, or how to manage the grazing, rainwater harvesting.
These are, we're still developing all these things, but next week we'll be talking about the erosion, so understanding the process of erosion and then finding solutions that are appropriate to it on a very micro scale, but then that can be upscaled also depending on what you'll find in the field. We want to do a kind of a soil analysis kind of workshop, so people can study different types of soils and learn more why this is relevant, and how to actually do it. How do you use a lot of the tools also? How do you make appropriate measurements? And tree planting is on the list.
Is it also about
identifying
composting?
Soil remediation.
Yeah.
How do you fix soil in certain areas? Because what they were doing in India was very different than their approach in California.
Okay.
Because Also, the resources that are at hand are different. But the nature of the resources might be very similar. And also, I think in California they purchased certain things because there are simply organic stores or specialized stores where you can get all this kind of stuff like volcanic ash and things like this. Whereas in India, the infrastructure isn't that like that. So you have to improvise with what's already on the land.
Yeah, but
it still works.
We don't have to have always fancy stuff to restore nature, because it's another industry then, and it can get again manipulated, what we don't necessarily want.
So these are some of the things that we're looking at. I would also like to see if we can develop more like community building workshops, and how to deal with the social aspects of a lot of these places, because I feel that certainly in many permaculture sites, that's an aspect that is very important, and it's not dealt with well enough. And if it isn't dealt with, then your group can fall apart. You have all kinds of issues that should have been talked about earlier, and then
And what do you think is the if you see the world, you travel around a bit, are the most important targets of this restoration movement? If it would be a movement, what would be if you would have already like 10,000 people who are in the movement and wanting to plant trees, what would be
are that many, but
but around us, because I see also there is a way of prevention. So there is we can go do a lot in prevention, but there is also another field where we can do a lot actually to bring back places which are totally arid in the last couple of decades.
It's important to look at many different factors before starting a place where you would practice ecosystem restoration, and that's also something that they're with the ecosystem restoration camps is what they're looking at. They found this place in Spain with a farmer who was open-minded and willing to cooperate, willing to have foreign people on his land and help with these issues in order to upskill them for this 600 hectare area, I think, or maybe bigger. I'm not sure anymore. And that is a site which is degraded, and there are social and economic difficulties in the area related to the degradation of the land. But it is also not a full sandy desert like this, the middle of the Sahara. So it's a place that's, and I haven't been there, but the thing is, like, you can't start at the worst place, because when you start here, you also need inputs that match this level. And so your inputs are here, and the degradation is here. When you start at a place where you're actually just conserving what you already have because it's fine, then you don't need that much labor.
So basically what you are saying is, don't start in the middle of the Sahara desert, but start with an oasis.
Start where it's manageable.
Or start where the Nile is flowing, and build it up gradually.
On the fringe. I think that's the place where you can have the largest success.
Because the social part is also very interesting, because I've seen documentaries also about Jeff Lawton's project in Jordan, and also I've visited some thesis defense where the guy was busy with water harvesting in Africa, and the issue was not that there is not enough water, because there was enough water, but maybe only in one month of the year. That was the equivalent what we have in the Netherlands.
Right.
But the people didn't have the mindset, the resources, but most of the time the mindset and the basic knowledge to actually do something with that water, they were like fighting against it when it
Mm.
was too much,
Mhm.
and then the rest of the year, the rest of the 11 months, they were suffering of not having it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for us, it seems logical, but it's also a very long learning process.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how they ended up
Mhm.
like that everything just dried out once.
Yeah.
Maybe too much goats.
Yeah, I don't know this particular situation, but I mean, basically, the the principles of ecosystem restoration or water management in certainly dryland areas is you have to keep the water under control. You have to keep it in places so that it can infiltrate in the soil and
Yeah.
feed the vegetation that is there and that you would put there with trees, for example. And yeah, it's a very very Dutch problem, I guess, to have to deal with too much water.
Hmm.
I'm not that experienced with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a matter of managing your runoff and trying to, like, you know, just like in permaculture, you have these energy
Yeah.
centers basically where you collect your water and then it goes
Yeah.
to the next place and then it goes to the next place. So you keep it on your land as long as possible, and also you have to slow it down because otherwise you create erosion.
Yeah.
Because fast water
It
takes away
takes away your
takes
soil.
away the
Yeah.
soil and moves
Yeah.
it
So
downstream.
basically the principles are pretty much the same like in permaculture, but
Well,
in permaculture you are more about designing a garden like place, and here you have maybe a forest or a meadow what you want to develop to.
a little bit. I mean, there are many different forms of doing this, and I would say permaculture, I think, is a much more holistic approach, and ecosystem restoration can be done using permaculture, but it isn't necessarily a permaculture approach. My background is very much in permaculture,
Yeah.
and so that's what I usually grab for.
Mhm.
Um,
But I don't really get how ecosystem restoration is not a holistic that much. You just put there a tree and it's
Well-
already can be labeled like it's ecosystem restoration.
Well, yes, you could, for
Yeah.
example, define it that way.
Yeah.
But permaculture also is an ethics-based approach. So you have the fair share, people
Mm.
care, and earth care ethics, and then you have the design principles.
Mm.
So, and that can be used to do ecosystem restoration. I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But
In my view, you with Renew, you
Mhm.
are also the foundation of Renew is also on these ethics or in these
For me,
ethical
yeah.
principles.
for me, yeah.
I mean, it's whoever is involved in this now. It's I mean, I know you a bit, guys.
Yeah.
You have also the ethical principles,
Yeah.
and I think it's just a positive thing to add. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you know, we are just
Yeah,
doing
no, I
the
think it should be there.
ecosystem,
Yeah, for sure.
because for the end, in the end, you are doing it for the better, for improvement, for not just for yourself,
To
not just
make life livable.
yeah,
And yeah, it's also as a project by otherwise it's about social and environmental justice, also social justice. So and ethics are simply a core part of what otherwise does. It's about, you know, bottom up approaches and taking care of the environment and of people. And I think that is also something that I think I would like to see more and more in Renew is also not just to renew and restore the earth, but also to renew and restore people from an inside out approach. As is also done at Quail Springs, for example, which is very much about healing oneself as we
By
heal the land. Also,
reconnecting with
Fukuoka,
nature.
you know, is a big about that. It's about
Yeah.
perfecting, or Fukuoka said gardening or farming is about becoming a perfect human or something like that.
Maybe could
Although,
be.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good addition for Renew. Like maybe you can say that it's a social and nature restoration program.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I think so.
because the other thing is that, as you said, also when you are approaching a certain field
Mm-hmm.
or land what you want to restore, you are engaging with social entities like people who live there or
Yeah.
some governmental stuff for
Yeah.
but also the reason why the land became arid
Mm-hmm.
or like very deserty
Mm-hmm.
because of the people. Normally,
Usually, yeah.
I mean, most of the time, I think it wouldn't go just one day to another
No.
totally dry. So there was some process. There was some processing going on, maybe for decades or hundreds of years, which were like taxing the land, and it was not based on ethics. It was
Right.
not based on empathy and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the people who live around. That happens
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Especially with cash crops, also with slavery, or just to have the peasants working for you for very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these landlords. Even we don't just have to think about the last 50 years with the Green Revolution and all of these chemicals,
Yes.
but before that,
Yeah.
there were already a lot of other stuff with monoculture and
Yeah, and I would say ultimately all of this is the result of us not being happy with who we are, and not knowing ourselves, and not acting out of compassion for ourselves and others and the world. So until we, fix things on a fundamental level, everything that we do is going to be, well, not so great for ourselves, I think.
yeah, it's the question of that people who have the choice to actually make the decision, because we are living in a hierarchical society.
Yes.
So as a farm worker, you don't necessarily have, maybe you are totally balanced with your soul, but maybe you don't have the choice to decide about the way of farming on that certain land, especially if it's not yours and if it's tens of thousands of hectares. But those
Right.
who are actually above,
Mhm.
like the owner
Mhm.
or some bigger companies who are involved in these farmings, they should also think about these principles, and if they are happy what they have or not.
Because you have to think win-win.
Yeah.
You can't think win-lose
Yeah.
and neglect your farmers or neglect your workers or whatever.
or the land what you are working on,
exactly.
or yourself. For
Because
example,
you'll end up screwing yourself.
interestingly, I met my granny's neighbor
Okay.
is a landlord. Like he was one of the beneficiaries of the system change in Hungary. So when the communism ended, he was the director of the state cooperative in that town.
Yeah.
So now he owns like a couple of thousand hectares
Right.
of land, maybe 2,000-3,000 hectares of
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
But he is having issues with his health, and
Right.
so you would think that this guy is wealthy, he knows what he does,
Yeah.
but in the end maybe not. He knows certain economical principles what he can use to accumulate wealth in a way, but on the other hand he's not benefiting from the system as one who could have access to all of the healthy stuff for easy.
Right.
So that's the thing, like, and I see it in many places. I was also working in a golf course, so all of the rich and shooting course. So, and the people look like, so
Unhappy.
they were drinking, smoking a lot. So
Sure.
they had access to the best of the best, but still they were kind of
Still trying to fill
slaves.
that void inside through material.
And in that sense they were
substances.
slaves of the same system what they are they supposed to be the beneficiaries of. It's very interesting.
Exactly. It's quite stupid,
Yeah.
to be honest.
One more question. What is the next challenge for Renew? What is the next challenge? What is the biggest step?
Well, next week is our first pilot project, our
Mhm.
first workshop. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. I guess that's the next thing,
Mhm.
really. That's the next thing on our agenda. And after that, in May, we'll have this thing with John D. Liu, and just to build more and more workshops and try to watch this community grow,
Yeah.
and to make sure that that is successful and becomes a healthy community. That's, I think, the real challenge.
Okay. And maybe at one point, maybe this year, it Renew will have its own entity. Who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of because we are kind of a separate subdivision of Otherwise, I guess.
Mhm.
We're not really sure what the future holds for that. We're still kind of discussing what are the pros and cons of kind of separating it from Otherwise, but we'll kind of have to see. At this moment, I can't say too much
Yeah,
about that.
but the plans are big, so we just let
yeah,
let it grow
Mhm.
and
yeah,
like, okay.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you are at the same time as you are involved in at Otherwise, you are also the leading
Well,
composer,
composer, I guess. That's what
and
it says on my Facebook
yeah,
account.
at
Because
Sunyata.
yeah.
It means emptiness, but also nature. I wrote it up here.
Yeah, it's a Sanskrit term
Sanskrit.
that is usually translated as emptiness, but emptiness in the West has negative connotations with it
Yeah.
as a nihilistic point of view, which I don't think it is. It means emptiness of a self. So all things are do not have an identity of their own, separate from everything else.
Okay.
Which really means
There is no
that
ego.
everything is and everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
And so everything that we do relates to everything else.
Okay.
And we're not islands. So
you started it in 2011, right?
Yeah, that was when the band first started, but we had no idea what we were going to do, really.
Yeah.
After a few years, it became more and more clear that we wanted to go into this style of combining what I call post-rock and stoner rock or stoner metal. So really heavy, groovy riffs with a kind of fuzzy guitar tone, and on the other hand, kind of more ambient and very pretty, really reverb and delay based, effect based guitar techniques, and without a singer, because it's a lot easier without a singer, and also creates a very different atmosphere, because you know, as people, you instantly notice vocal melodies, vocal lines, and we wanted the attention to be on the music, and it's also, if you don't have a singer, that's a whole nother opinion you don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
And technically for music, it's also easier.
And how does it relate to the Renew, to your artistic side? Because I read something about that you also deal with sustainability as a topic, but without a singer.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't have lyrics.
Yeah.
We have some song titles like Life of Nature and Mind of Man.
Yeah.
I express a lot of what I do in the rest of my life through the music, and that's how it came to be this way. Our drummer is he is also a media. He works in the media in Amsterdam as a video engineer, and he edits videos for his work, and we kind of figured, well, without a singer, we want something during our live shows for people to grab onto for their with their attention, so we came up with these visuals, and we edited them ourselves, and they follow the music, and we found thematically we found a lot of content from like nature things, all kinds of stuff, like large cloud formations, desert lands, dust clouds, waves, and also the growth of life, basically seeds and animals and all this kind of stuff. And so in the video of Life of Nature, which can also be found on YouTube, if you Google or find search in YouTube Shunyata Life of Nature, you'll find the visual video. I think there's also one with a live video, and you'll hear the music with the video and kind of see like, oh, it's a artistic expression of the circle of life in a sense, but in a cool heavy metal kind of way.
Wow.
Yeah.
The experience can be similar, like maybe it's a bad comparison, but are you familiar with Samsara, the movie?
Yeah.
Where they have these different music and then these different shots about different topics of nature, but they also show the not too nice parts.
Well, a big influence on us is Kayani Skatsi.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that, but that was I think during the 70s or 80s. This also a movie that came out, or a series of movies with music by Philip Glass, which is also kind of minimalist music, a lot of electronic stuff, very repetitive, but also gradually transforming. And our music is also kind of trying to be this kind of organic kind of music that gradually transforms and takes the listener on a journey rather than being a pop song.
Yeah, cool.
You know.
So it's a full experience with visual and
audio
visual experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's very, very intense and powerful. And so nature is one of our topics, but also like a lot of this more spiritual stuff and the issues in the world are featured in our videos.
Okay, and where do you perform most of the time? Yeah.
Well, our next show is also next week on Sunday, so I have a very busy weekend next week at DB Studios in Utrecht.
I'm not sure if this episode will be launched by then, but
sure. But that's okay.
Is it in nature? Or mostly
no,
it's like normal setting, normal concert setting.
Yeah, it's normal concert setting, but in like fairly small venues, like Aku in Utrecht. We played in Louwburg 3 times. In Wageningen, we're also playing on May 5th at the Cabal am Gemaal stage here in Wageningen. We played in Amsterdam. We played in Antwerp once. Also in a kind of like a rock bar kind of place. But we are growing. And
how is your relation with your fans?
Positive.
Do they get this message of nature?
I think so. I think so. It's difficult because we didn't like have them fill in a questionnaire or something about do you get it? Because so we talked to some people and they really like the visuals and they really like the music. We actually we managed to get on May 5th by winning the Louwburg show in February. I guess if people didn't like it, then they wouldn't have had us win.
Nice. Because with a rock style, it's difficult to imagine. You see these videos with Vivaldi and the spring and the four seasons and stuff, and the flowers are coming. But it can be interesting. So people look it up.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely a different experience. The other thing also of not having a singer is also that we don't have one person in the spotlights. We don't have ego. Well, we have some ego bullshit, but it's still, we're all 4 of us on the same level.
Yeah, I've heard that it can be difficult with the singer as a.
Yeah. It's a different kind of musician.
Yeah.
So they're always kind of on their own in a way. Anyway, that's I think everything I could say about the band at the moment. Another topic is we're also working on mushrooms.
Okay.
Last year I did my thesis on shiitake cultivation on logs. I did a thesis report called Costs and Benefits of Log-Based Mushroom Cultivation in the Netherlands. And I basically did a kind of a case study of 4 farmers here in the Netherlands who professionally inoculate oakwood logs with shiitake plugs and either sell the logs as edible wood, eetbaar hout. For instance, Pip Gilmore of Groene Takken in Doetinchem. And you can buy them at the Hogeborn, for example.
What was the initial question of the thesis? That was something interesting.
The main question was, what are the it was not just about the financial costs and benefits, but also like the less easily quantified costs and benefits, or at least benefits. And so I did that in terms of ecosystem services. And this year I actually started with 2 other guys to actually with 100 logs to inoculate these, and we had our first workshop 2 weeks ago, the inoculation workshop also at Pau, so we have 100 logs there, and it takes over a year and a half for the log to get colonized, and then they're ready to fruit, and you can get the first mushrooms.
So maybe
we'll
it can be
goes.
Also part of the renew at some point. Maybe it can merge.
A little bit. I'm not really sure how, because it's not something that I think can be done so easily in desert areas, because the conditions under which the logs have to be kept are quite
humid.
Yeah, they have to be the thing that matters the most is that the wood moisture content is at a certain level, because when it gets under 25%, the shiitake fungus dies. So it has to stay at a comfortable 40%. And so you need a laying yard where the logs can be kept most of the time. And we found a really nice place in the forest here with some bamboo around it. So it's out of the wind and it's out of the sun. It's a very nice shaded area, and it's just kept relatively cool and humid.
Back a little bit to the ecosystem restoration.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that it would be also an idea to approach not just already arid lands like in Spain or in the Mediterranean, but also what I see, for example, where we live around Wageningen and around the Randstad is everywhere houses and buildings and factories, but so we have this feeling of crowdedness. But if you go up north to the Netherlands or to the south, it's like huge lands, and also in northern France, in Germany, in Hungary, where I'm from, you see these enormous thousands of hectares of lands without even a tree in between. But the soil is still good. They harvest a lot, but maybe the prevention aspect can be even more highlighted in these areas, because they are still very fertile. And if they go arid, then we really have to figure out some stuff.
I mean, I think I'm not sure what the latest climate change models are saying, but I mean the deserts are advancing, you could say. But the thing about Renew is that, and I agree there should be projects for this, but the thing about Renew is not that we will actually be setting up our own sites, but we would connect people with these sites and bring them there to work on specific issues that these places are dealing with. And then if you have for like 2 or 3 weeks, if you have a group of 20-30 people there to help on a specific site, like to build a dam or to build some kind of catchment area, that can help a lot, and the people can learn and the site can be helped. So if there's a place that's willing to work with us,
So you are
in
open
Germany
for
or
that
France
too?
or
Yeah,
somewhere, yeah, sure, of course,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and we will be looking also at places outside of Wageningen once we are a bit more solidly
yeah.
founded.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that there is another or there are other sites besides Pau.
Mhm.
What can be possible places
Yeah.
around Wageningen?
For instance, the Creative Garden next to
cool.
Hoogborn, and the student farm. We were talking also to Kees van Vedu, who's got a project coming up, I think later this year, like in the next school year, I think, at the student student farm.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some places that we're looking at. There are also other sites, maybe at the at the Uiterwaarde. I think we can maybe see if I guess the municipality or the waterschap or something deal with that area, and maybe we can talk to them about like, hey, can we have some kind of a workshop here? Because of course, understanding how the river works is and how the floodplains work. That's a system that is relatively stable, and why isn't that eroding? Well, there are many reasons why. Come to our workshop and find out.
Yeah. Okay.
So it'd be cool to look at these things and look at what we have in the area, look also outside of Wageningen.
So you would say that you can also offer extra hands-on experience for those who are into gardening and already familiar with many basic stuff, but you, as an addition, there is much more to learn about a bigger system than a garden.
Yeah, and I mean that's also the thing with practical learning. I think you can't do it too much. It's just like learning guitar. You can't learn a scale by playing it one time. No, you have to do it 5,000 times before you know it.
Yeah, and the community aspect is also important.
For sure.
So I guess it's also
healthy,
like
happy people.
Healthy, happy people. Nice. Having fun.
Yeah.
By restoring.
Having fun and learning and doing good work. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to add anything else?
I think we pretty much hit all the topics. So, no, I'd like to enjoy the weather.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here, and say hi to the people. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao ciao.
Cheers.